That means it's supposed to be done growing tomatoes right now. And look here. There's another one right there. Goodness gracious, it's a busy day in the garden. I gotta do a bunch of things today, and I figured why not bring you guys along. We got fertilizing to do. We got some picking to do. I got a little bit of planning to do. Checking on the chickens, just all kinds of stuff. It's a busy time of year. We're going from summer to fall, and now quickly, fall season for us in the south is really short. And so then we're going into the winter garden, and it really starts basically now. If y'all remember, I had that big butternut squash plant out there, and I pulled it up yesterday and gave the chickies 2 butternut squash. Didn't know if they'd even eat it, and I would say that they liked it. There's one over there, and then there's a little bit of a shell right there. And that chicken right there, she's meanie. She thinks she rules the roost, so. But yeah, they apparently like it. So for us down here in zone 8A in North Carolina, our fall season can go from, like, seriously, I'm not even joking, from October to like the middle of November. Or it could go from September all the way into like the middle of December. And this year looks like it's gonna be the first one. So, you know, it's really warm today. It's not as warm, but it's gonna cool down real fast, and then that's gonna affect the garden. So we got a big rain coming in. We've got, I think now it's gonna be a tropical depression, Nicole, coming. So we're gonna get a couple inches of rain, and it's a really good time to get some of this fertilizer down, because the rain will go ahead and just water that stuff in and break it up. And I've been using this new fertilizer, and I don't know how I feel about it just yet. So this isn't the exact brand that I want to use, but for this time of year, it works out well because it's an 851, and so we get a lot more nitrogen for this fertilizer. And the reason why I wanted to switch from what I usually use is, if I can get in the bag here, it's these pellets. And so I like the pellets because I can see it break down, and then I know when it's getting into the garden. And I mean, what I was using before, it wasn't pellets, it was, I have to go in here, I got a whole bunch of it. I'm not gonna throw it out, I'm obviously gonna keep using it, but let me see if I can find it in my shed here. So I've been using this garden tone, and I'll take you out here and show you what it looks like in case you haven't never used it. It's pretty standard, and it's a 10-10-10 fertilizer, so it's equally balanced with the NPK. But you can see it's not really, like, it goes down and it just looks like pebbles, but it doesn't really, I don't know. I think it's time for a little bit of a change. So we're gonna give it a shot, see what the difference is. Put this other fertilizer down one time. Now, the one issue with this fertilizer in particular is my dog really wants to try and eat it. So that is kind of an issue. But otherwise, it seems to be working okay. I've only done one application, and it should be kicking, but I've definitely seen some pickup in the growth. I'm not very technical about what I do, so I'm just gonna put it in this old flower pot and then walk around and just sprinkle it in the garden. And this should do a couple of the beds. A soil test a couple years ago, and it said that all soil tests are gonna say you're low on nitrogen because nitrogen is water soluble, but everything else was elevated. And so, like, my phosphorus was elevated, for example, and a lot of that was the amount of compost that I was using. So this, you know, with it being more nitrogen and this time of year, because a lot of what we're growing is greens and stuff like that, then they can use extra nitrogen to grow. So it kind of works out well in our favor because it has less of the other nutrients in it. But we're just gonna go down and put it right along the row. And actually, I don't even put it along the row right now because I have things interplanted, which is part of the planning part of this video. But I don't want to put any really next to the carrots because it is higher nitrogen and they don't really need higher nitrogen. So I just put a couple handfuls around the base of each plant. And as it rains over the coming days, it'll break it down nice and neat. You know, I might put a little bit out there, but nothing crazy. The carrots are really starting to pop, so. And we'll give this little patch of kohlrabi here that I just kind of threw out a little bit just to kind of get it up and going. So I've started using it, and it could be because it's gotten a little bit cooler or not, I don't know. I'm never really prepared to say like, yes, this fertilizer works great, but you can see how the broccoli plants have really started to come along. And we do have a little bit of pest damage on this one, but I'm not overly concerned about that. I did treat it, and it did actually get a little bit worse, but if we look on the bottom, I don't see any caterpillars left. I do see eggs, however. So we'll have to come out and treat this again because you can see these eggs in here. And I mean, a good first line of defense is just kind of rub them. Crush what you can. But this is really the only plant that's getting ate. Oh, there it is. There's our culprit. And just like that, he's gone. So we'll wait till after this storm, the next couple days, and then we'll come out and treat it. But I mean, this bed's actually doing pretty good. The carrots are really coming along. This is the first sowing. The second sowing did okay, and then the third sowing's coming along. And I have this one broccoli plant here. She's a lazy one, so I'm gonna have to get a little stake and just prop it up. The wind's kind of blown it over and done its part. When it comes to like my containers and stuff, I'll just drop like a little handful in, nothing major. Not even a handful, just like a couple sprigs of this fertilizer in, because it doesn't take much. You know, it's a little space. You got one plant in there, you don't need a whole lot. Now I have these other beds here, and they're gonna get a little bit different treatment. This is my turnip, my kohlrabi, turnip, and radish bed. And I may put a little bit of fertilizer in, but not a whole lot. I mean, these things are doing amazing. Look at that. That one's ready to go, wouldn't you say? Now that's a turnip. Got a good set of greens on it. That's a turnip. We're gonna eat that one for dinner. But you can see the foliage is plenty lush right here, so I'm not really concerned about that. This bed here, there's only a couple things. So the tomatoes are gonna finish out probably, they'll start struggling hard next week, I'd say, because it's gonna get pretty cold. But you can see I've been making a little pile of tomatoes, and it is ripen out here. Once this plant goes, this chard will take off. I'm not concerned about that because it can actually take the cold pretty well. And then we have a couple, I believe this is either kohlrabi or turnips here, just a little small patch. But all of this is gonna be garlic and then potatoes, so we're not even gonna really fertilize this. I may put a little bit right here in these spots where things are gonna grow. But for the most part, there's no need to fertilize that bed at all. And then this one over here, this has got a couple cabbage. I just had to replace them the other day. I had some extra seedlings, so I put a couple cabbage in. We've got some Brussels sprouts. We've got some mustard right here. And this mustard's for us, this mustard's for the chickens, and this mustard is for both of us. So we have all that ready to go. The collards that are here, I believe they got overwatered, but we're cutting our watering down starting yesterday. So we're gonna be adding fertilizer in and treating this bed. And then this one, we're preparing for our onions. So we're gonna fertilize this whole bed. I've left these peppers on just to see if I could get any more. It looks like I'm gonna get maybe one more. But we have some lettuce and some kohlrabi, so we'll fertilize all of this bed and then get this ready, because we're gonna put, once this is up, then we're gonna put a row of onions in right here. And so that should do well. So you're talking about rows. You've heard me mention rows a couple times, and I said I was gonna be doing some planning, and that is a big part of what's going to happen next year. So typically, I think I've looked at the way that I've grown my garden backwards. And usually what I do is, see my beds, generally speaking, they're 4 feet wide by 8 feet long. But when I look at planting my garden in my head, I always stand out here in front and look at it. So what I end up doing is I end up planting in rows going like this. And you can see that I've done that. I mean, you can see like here, row, row, row. And what I want to start doing next year is planting this way. So I think that's going to be, man, mosquito got me. That's going to be a better use of space, I think, because I can get a continuous row going down, and instead of worrying myself about up and back, I think I can, first of all, the way the sun comes in, comes in this way, I get the majority of my sun from this side, so it'll be easier for me to stagger the heights of the plants going through the garden. So, you know, lowest up front and then on back. And it makes sense to me. And the thing that's the kicker is, I mean, I put my trellises up that way. They all go that way. So I don't know. It never really rung in my head, but that's kind of what I'm planning to do for my entire garden. And even in the greenhouse, I did the same thing. I would plant, you know, I have 2-foot bed on each side, and I would plant 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. Instead, I could be planting up and down. And that's going to help me be more productive, I think, and able to maximize my space inside of my garden. Look at that. We got more tomatoes ready. Nice vine-ripe tomatoes in November. And so this is a Roma tomato, and look, it's like a contraption going on here. It's fallen over, and I've picked it up, and it's grown. But look at all the tomatoes on it still. And the reason why I point out that it's a Roma tomato is because it's a determinate type tomato. That means it's supposed to be done growing tomatoes right now. And look here. There's another one right there. And look, here's the smallest red tomato I've ever seen. It's crazy. But I mean, we just walked through here, and you know, I've left some of these tomatoes up because the ones that are vine ripening right now, I want to save the seeds for next year. I figure the 2 plants that are really left are going strong. They were very productive this year. They were very hardy. They didn't get as bit by the disease as bad, so that works out well. But I'm not gonna lie, I'm ready to get them out of here. I'm kind of tired of looking at tomatoes at this point and worrying about them. You know, other than the ones that I've tested, the other ones, I'm like, you know, I'm over it. It's almost, you know, what is it? We have another month and a half until the official start of winter, and I'm just kind of done. You know, they're not really producing enough to write home about, so my mama don't care. That's what I'd like to say. The cayenne pepper that we grew, that I left, I told you I was gonna leave, it's still producing. And we're gonna get all of these off before the storm comes, because they ain't gonna do no good. And it could be the end of this plant. So you never know. You get all that rain, you never know what's gonna happen. While it may be a blessing that we're getting a bunch of rain, when you go a long time without rain and then you get a bunch of rain at first, it's actually almost no good, because what happens is the soil's not prepared to accept all that water, and so it'll just run off or run straight through those pots or something like that. And so that's why we keep our irrigation going as long as we can, and we try to make as few adjustments as possible. So when you go through it, you know, these big rains that you get all at once, it's really not as good as like we do in gardening, you know, 1 inch a week, you know, a constant, I don't want to say scheduled, because weather is not scheduled, but you know, a regular kind of flow of water. Now I do want to show you something, and I know I haven't talked much about this. I said I was starting onions, and so I had to move these in last night because I don't even know if you can see them. They're so incredibly small. Let's see, like right here, we basically have onions coming up in every tray, every cell. Moved them into the greenhouse because the temperature fluctuations, I want to kind of maximize or minimize the amount of fluctuation in the temperature. So that's why they're sitting in here. They're going to be in here during the storm protected as long as the roof stays on. But even for here, like these are we got all of this is kohlrabi. I just went through and thinned them out. I seeded them kind of heavy because I didn't want to take any chances. And I still have a couple left. And what I did is, see how this one's like laying over? Even though it seems like it would be bigger, I just go ahead and cut that. Because it's not gonna, you know, it's basically weak. It's weak stem, so it's just gonna lay over. So I've got a couple more to come out and thin. This is our Toscana kale. So we're starting to get some true leaves. We just gave a little bit of fertilizer, so this will come back and then we'll start planting that. Probably, depending on the weather, we might put a couple plants out in the garden, but more than likely they're gonna go in the greenhouse here. And then we have our lettuce here. There's lettuce outside that's done a lot better, but this one is weak. And then this one is actually, we just started this yesterday, and this is gonna be rutabaga, and it's gonna be grown from seed to harvest inside the greenhouse. And I started that last year where I planted some seeds in the greenhouse to see how they would do. And to my surprise, I got them to germinate in like the middle of December, which is low sun, cool weather. The only issue I have is it stayed too cool in here for the seeds. So like we had a couple warm days, they would germinate and then they would stunt because of the cold. But now that we've added we've added bigger water containers for our solar heating, our passive solar heating, because there's no electrical out here, then we're thinking that even that couple degrees, and not that, but if I even just take like a 6-pack and put it on each container, then I could possibly get that soil warm enough to, or stay warmer at night so that it can come up and continue to grow and push out. So we're continuously testing that, and we'll let you guys know how that goes. But that's always been a thing of mine. The issue with the greenhouse that I have is everything is a proprietary system for it, meaning if you don't have the right screws or the right connectors, you can't add shelves. So I'm working on that because I need to add more shelves so I can, if this does indeed work, to get more seeds in there. Because as I grow more and more onions, I'm gonna be sowing onions and seed cells every 2 weeks from here until January. A full 36 seed cells. So that's what one of the trays is. So if I do that, then I can get them out here because they can take a cold, and I can harden them off out here and let them grow on the shelf out there. And that would be really a goal of mine, because then that alleviates the space requirements for inside my house. Because it just, you know, once we start going, like at first it's all fine and dandy, and then there's certain things that you need to up pot. And once I start up potting that stuff, then the seed shelf just gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And then I've got plants just falling out. So I need to kind of utilize the greenhouse even more and get it ready so in like February and March, we can really start putting stuff out there, especially stuff that needs to harden off. Is this basil? It's got 2 more days. And then we're gonna cut it, all the basil, and this is gonna make all of the pesto we need for the next year. Should make more than enough. And interestingly enough, the stress from the weather lately, this is the first time this basil's tried to go to flower. Now I'm not anxious to get this out because personally, I love the smell of basil. It's a mix between basil and tomatoes. The smell of both of them is just, it's refreshing to me. It just reminds me of life. And so I'm not looking forward to getting rid of the basil. I mean, I'm standing right here and I can smell it right now. But we'll have plenty to go for the whole winter and even into the spring and probably summer. So 2 plants is all you need. If you guys are still growing in your gardens, let me know below what you're growing. And if you intend to grow it through the winter, or if you can grow it, I'm curious to know. There's so many things that you can grow in the right climate, even under some frost protection and season extension stuff. You can get into the winter season. And let's not trip. Growing in winter doesn't mean growing all the way until spring. You just got to make it to December 22nd.